We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. Lindsay Patterson, Mike Santagata here. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. A little over a week into free agency, and I'm telling you, every time we record a podcast, there is news right after. That one happened on Monday, actually, the Trent Brown news that he was visiting Cincinnati, and it was really quick. Some of the backstory on it, according to James Rapine, the Bengals contacted his agent on Sunday. They had some interest. They brought him in. He met with the team, and the deal is done. 1-year deal. I haven't seen the numbers when it comes to Trent Brown yet, but feels like a good 1-year piece, and it really doesn't stop them from picking an offensive tackle in this draft, and we'll get to that in our next segment, but feels like a quality signing for this team if he can stay healthy.
Yeah. Man, if he could stay healthy thing's big though, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're talking about a guy that I think he's awesome. I think he's a really good player. I think an awesome pass protector. He explodes out of his stance for his size. I think in the open field, it's a little hit or miss with his size, but he's ginormous. He's 40 pounds bigger than Orlando Brown. I think the length, everything's awesome. I think when he's on the field, he's going to be great. There's some effort concerns about if they're losing a lot, which I guess they do start slow sometimes, but I'm not that concerned about that. That could just be what some people say when a prospect or when a prospective free agent leaves. I would say that the only thing I think is worth noting is he's in the past, and every year I'm not counting his rookie year. So since his second year on, the only reason I'm not counting his rookie year is because it would make this worse. Because he was a 7th round pick and it took him a while to become a starter. He was a full-time starter by his second year. If you count every possible game he could have started and count the games he started, he has started less than 40% of those games. He started 39% of the possible games in his career. So that's a concern. I know some people just ignore it. They're like, injuries happen. It's like, well, bad? I mean, it's the same people that are trying to say like, DJ Reader is only on the field 60% of snaps. And that's not even just like because he can't. Some of that's because he's not going to play more than 70, 65, 60% of snaps in most games. He's not starting more than 40% of his games. He started all of his games 2 years ago. Last year, he got benched, weirdly. I think there was a weird situation going on in New England. So it's not all injury related. But yeah, that's just a major concern for me. And I think a reason that it almost becomes possibly more likely that they're going to draft a guy early in this draft to compete with him. I think Trent Brown will win that job when he's healthy. But I also think whoever would compete with him is probably going to get a shot to play this season.
Yeah, we'll get to that in just a moment. But just overall with Trent Brown, if we're looking at the glass half full and he's healthy, you think about what Orlando Brown brings on the left side and then Trent Brown on the other side, 2 6'8" guys, huge guys. That would be huge for the Cincinnati Bengals. And if you were to kind of compare it to, because it is kind of crazy, there's a new right tackle. It feels like every single offseason so far in the Joe Burrow era. But if you have these two guys, they stay healthy, and you think about this offensive line, Cordell Volson, and the offseason's not over. I wouldn't be surprised if this team still had an offer on the table to Becton and said, hey, do you want to compete for a guard position? Or do you want to be here as kind of a swing tackle depth piece on our O-line if you're not getting any other offers out there? I think it would still be extremely smart on the front office because, again, a guy who obviously in Becton has battled injuries too and probably hasn't lived up to the expectations early on in his career, would still be smart to add more offensive line depth in this room, even if you do go offensive line in the draft. So for me personally, if he can stay healthy, it's probably going to be one of Joe Burrow's better right tackles, if not best right tackle that he's played with.
Only thing that scares me is I said that so much about La'el Collins, because if you watch even La'el Collins last year in Dallas, it was like, yeah, this guy's still good. And then he came to Cincinnati, he wasn't as good anymore. So yes, in theory, best right tackle Joe Burrow has ever had. I'm going to keep it there. I'm not going to say definitely going to be the best right tackles that he's had since Willie Anderson, because that is the possibility here. But Does he reach that? How many games does he play? I think if you're looking at just the glass half full, just the optimistic viewpoint, absolutely. This is an awesome right tackle for him. Probably the best he's had since Willie. I mean, Andre was pretty good. You have the Jonah year in there and everything else. Kind of also tells you Lyle and Riley Reef and everything else they threw out there, Fred Johnson, Hakeem Adeniji. It's like not a high bar for some of that, yeah. But, I think he's a really good player when he's on the field and he's motivated. So if that's what's going on, and let's just live in that world where that's all that's going to happen, he's awesome. I mean, I think he's right up there. He's as good as Orlando Brown when he's fully healthy and motivated and on the field. He could be dominant during stretches. His length, his strength, his ability to move at his size, it all stands out. You're talking about just the size, but he can move a little bit. And both those guys, yes, very tall, very long. They're very strong. I think it tells you where they want to go in the run game, which is the same place they've been going the past couple of years. I think this is better for the run game. I think overall he's a better player than Jonah Williams. It's just the concern about how often is he going to play, when's he on the field. He hasn't missed a playoff game, only 4 playoff games in his career, but he hasn't missed one. He was on the field for all 3 of the Patriots games when they won the Super Bowl and then played one more. That was Mac Jones, I think, rookie season was the other game he played. So he's always on the field for those. And I've said that about Teron Armstead and Tyron Smith, although they are more at like the 12, 13 playoff game mark than 4. But they're on the field when it matters. So I think that's important too, is to be able to get on the field when everything's on the table. He's able to get onto the field and play those games. It's just that you probably have to have some good depth with him.
Yeah, and I still think that is still on the table for the Cincinnati Bengals to bring in, or they will draft. When you went back and you watched some of the tape and having a quarterback like Mac Jones, I'm sure it was probably a big headache and if Zappy. You're an offensive lineman. And Zappy. But if you were to go back and you watch some of the highlights in the tape of Trent Brown, what really stands out about him as an offensive lineman?
Still powerful, still able to drive guys. He really moved Quinnen Williams twice in the Jets game. There were double teams, but he's the drive guy on that double, so it's his power, able to push a near all-pro level player down the field. I think when he's landing his run game stuff is phenomenal. I don't think it always lands. I think that the athleticism shows up more there than it does in pass protection. I think in pass protection, he looks good. I haven't seen much of a drop-off. Now, is there going to be a drop-off because of this injury or anything? I don't know. But I haven't seen much drop-off from his previous years to this past year. I still think he's a good player, a very good player in pass protection. He's a better pass protector than he is a run blocker, even though he's got all that power, just because he has the strength. He can explode out of his stance. And when I watched him, I mean, there are lapses. I think the guard play hurt him a little bit. Seemed like there was some miscommunications from time to time. I think he's been a better right tackle than he has a left tackle. He was mostly a left tackle last season. So there's a lot of reason to be optimistic that when he's on the field, his first 4 weeks, when he should be healthy on the field, motivated, he's going to give you some really good play, because I still think he's a very good player.
Yeah, just some of the takeaways from his press conference yesterday. It was virtual with the Cincinnati media, and you could tell he had a lot of confidence in himself, and he didn't want to talk about his time with the Patriots or anything like that. He wanted to talk about the now, and I think all of that is extremely important, because you do hear, even Duke Manyweather, I said, tell me everything about him, because he works with Duke. He's actually training with Duke today. And obviously one of the O-line experts for a lot of NFL players and NFL prospects. And, a lot of people, they bring all those stories of kind of what happened with the Patriots. And you know what? Sometimes a new place can really help a player. So we'll see what happens here. And, you have a guy like Orlando Brown Jr., who I want to see him again, in year 2 with the Cincinnati Bengals. And he even said, he was talking to the media yesterday, Orlando Brown, who I'm referencing, was saying, hey, it's my normal offseason for once, because every offseason he's either dealing with going to a new team, he's getting traded, he's on a franchise tag. And it's been kind of nice for him to have a little bit of a normal offseason. You bring a guy like Trent Brown. So we'll see what that looks like for them. I still feel like the Cincinnati Bengals will bring in another depth piece. I don't know if it'll be at guard or if it will just be a swing tackle, because I think you need to look at that room and do a little better when it comes to the depth. And that's even if they do get a rookie offensive tackle. Anything more you want to say about Trent Brown before we talk NFL prospects?
Nah, I mean, it's nice to have the versatility because what that means is if you're going to get a JC Latham and a Marius Mims, whoever, a Taliese Fuaga, and they're just right tackle only right now, maybe you're trying to train them to be a left tackle, or you're probably not if you're the Bengals, but the right tackle only, he can play left tackle. So if either offensive tackle gets hurt, he could move to left tackle and let that prospect play right tackle. If Becton was the opposite and he played bunch of right tackle and then has only done a tiny bit of left tackle, that would be great for that signing. But he's played a lot of left tackle. He's barely played right tackle. He's played it, but he's barely done it. So that's one part of that signing that might not mesh perfectly. But it's nice to have two different offensive tackles that are versatile enough that they could flip sides if needed because of an injury or whatever else is going on.
I'm still holding out hope they called Dalton Risner. We'll see. We'll see. I think that would be a slam dunk, wishful thinking. Probably not going to happen. But yeah, the biggest thing is this offensive line. Just stay healthy and protect number 9. But I want to get to some of the NFL prospects with all the pro days happening around the NFL next on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. The Cincinnati Bengals have a 1-year rental on Trent Brown. The thing is, we don't have the numbers yet. And normally when the number is really high for a 1-year deal or any contract, it gets out because the agent wants it to get out. And there's been no number so far when it comes to Trent Brown. So I'm feeling like it might be really team friendly for the Cincinnati Bengals. Maybe some incentives when it comes to health and playing in games. We'll be on top of that. And maybe we'll be talking about another extension, but I know he's a little older for their type when you think of some of these extensions or free agent players. But moving on to the NFL prospects, it still gives the Cincinnati Bengals. I know we've talked a lot about offensive tackle and who's going to be there. You see some of these other teams in front of the Cincinnati Bengals. They're adding wide receivers. Some are adding offensive linemen. And you think, well, maybe one of these top offensive linemen will fall to 18 for the Cincinnati Bengals. For me personally, it still puts the club in a good spot where they can still be flexible. I know it's a little scary because we just talked about Trent Brown and he could have injuries and he's had those in the past. And what does that mean for the right tackle position? Should you just get a tackle no matter what, even if it's not your number 1 guy on the list? For me, I still think they go into this draft and they can go BPA. Maybe they get a defensive tackle, Byron Murphy II. Maybe it's Johnny Newton. Maybe it's a cornerback, or they see a guy who's been marked to them, I feel like, more than any other player right now, JC Latham. We've talked about him before and said he feels like the perfect Cincinnati Bengals draft pick. Not saying he's a perfect prospect. I know he had his pro day today, and I know a lot of people are freaking out because he didn't test, and all of that is extremely important. You look at guys like Jackson Carman, didn't test. Billy Price, didn't test. Cedric Ogbuehi, didn't test. So, it does feel a little PTSD for Bengals fans when they think about the testing of an offensive lineman and just how he's the Alabama, the SEC guy. Will they get JC Latham? What should they do? For me personally, if you're the Cincinnati Bengals and say these are the only moves you made in free agency, who would you want them to pick at 18?
Oh, I mean, it's tough because I think you still might go Johnny Newton, who might be there. Mm-hmm. I mean, who I want, Brock Bowers. Yeah. I feel like you've probably plugged enough holes. Nose tackle still out there, but that's not a first-round pick, probably. I don't think anybody has T'Vondre Sweat in the first round at this point, which, great. Let him fall to 49. That's where I'd pick him. Mm-hmm. But we're at 18, I'd look at if Brock Bowers is there, hey, that's an easy one for me. My second pick would be either Johnny Newton, who I think will be there because it seems like the NFL isn't as high on him, and he has that foot thing going on right now. I think that's what the injury was. Or I think out of the guys who could be there, I think I have Olufashinu the highest because it seems like there is a little bit of smoke that he could fall. Personally, I think that's kind of like prospect fatigue. I think because he has been billed as the number 1 offensive tackle or number 2 offensive tackle for 2.5 years now for this draft class. And the longer you see that about a guy, the more holes you're going to put into his tape and into his profile. Whereas a guy like Fuaga, a guy like Fatanu, a guy like Latham, like Mims, they don't have that much tape or they have tape, plenty of tape. But what I'm saying, they haven't been that high level of prospect that people are going over the tape that heavily this entire time. So he's up there for me. Out of the offensive tackles who I think will be there, I might go Mims over Latham because Latham didn't test. That worries me. I think that's something that I look at the past and I see that before there was no testing, I was Latham over Mims just because I think he's probably safer. But when you lose the safety of the testing, well, maybe you just go Mims, who's had the injury concerns and the small sample size concerns. But I think he has a really good shot if he stays healthy to be the best offensive tackle in this entire class.
Yeah, and he's a big guy. If that's what they want to do and just add a lot of big bodies, and I know a lot of people want to talk about his starts when it's Mims. You know, didn't have a whole lot of starts in college, but you look at the guys who were in front of him to get on the field. I don't think knocking on wood, the injury history is that huge. I know a lot of people want to connect it with Mims and just say, oh, what about the injuries and everything like that? He only battled how many injuries in college?
Mims? Yeah, he injured himself in his second career start in that national championship game. And then he got hurt this past year, came back and aggravated it. So, and then I guess he pulled a hamstring or something at the combine.
Yeah.
So you're looking at 3 injuries and 1 re-aggravation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's plenty, but at the same time, for me, if they want to just go big body guys and maybe the talent will be there with Mims, he feels all over the place because at one point, maybe right after the combine, a lot of people are like, well, top 10, top 15. Now It's like, will he be there late when the Cincinnati Bengals pick? I don't even know if he'll be there. I agree with you. I think a lot of people, it's just the fatigue right now with a lot of these prospects. And what's crazy about it, as we're recording this, we're about 5 weeks away from draft night. So we'll finally have that answer where the Cincinnati Bengals want to go. I just feel like they didn't want to go into the draft feeling like this is a need. We have to do this because when you reach, you get a player like Billy Price. And you don't want to be in that situation, or Cedric Ogbuehi, or just a past offensive lineman that didn't work out for them. And obviously they're not going to draft, O-lineman, but you got to start at some point. You got to get the guy. And then maybe they feel more comfortable with an offensive lineman who could play the guard position. I know we've talked about prospects when it comes to the offensive line. For me personally, it's trenches. It's trenches all the way. Of course, if their cornerback is there, I wouldn't be surprised if they take a cornerback. If a Brock Bowers happens to fall, yeah, I don't know if they would get Brock Bowers. I'm starting to feel like they wouldn't draft him if he was there, and that sounds crazy, right?
I think they'd take him. They were really interested in Dalton Kincaid and Sam Laporta last season. He's, I think, as a prospect, better than those two and plays a similar role of being such a high functioning, can play in the slot, high functioning receiver. I feel like they'll be very interested in him. I don't think he falls that far, to be quite honest. But I think if he was there, I think they'll be interested. I think he's another guy that he's been in the cycle so long.
Maybe I'm getting tired.
Yeah, people are a little tired of him and they want the new thing.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm team Brock Bowers. I was team Michael Mayer last year. I remember sitting there. He was still available, and I thought Bengals are going to take Michael Mayer. It's just a home run hit. They're going to take him, and believe me, I like Myles Murphy. I am excited about Myles Murphy. Love the pick. Can't wait for him in year 2. Hopefully, he gets more opportunities. I don't feel like they missed there, but it's just crazy who you think they're going to take and who they really take at that point. So we'll see how the draft board goes. A lot can change for the Cincinnati Bengals. I think with these 10 picks, I don't see them picking 10 players. I know they value draft picks. I know they love draft night more than probably any other team in the NFL. But for me, I feel like this is the perfect opportunity when it comes to those depth pieces or starters in other positions. Say they don't get Brock Bowers and there's a tight end. A running back feels a little early in the second round for me, maybe more of a third round guy. Maybe a wide receiver is there on day 2. I could see them using some of those late picks and saying, you know what, we want to move up. Maybe their nose tackle who they feel is going to get off the board, they want to move up, even though this draft isn't filled with nose tackles. It just, for me at 18, I think they just want to go in there and feel like, okay, you know what? BPA. It's BPA all day, because you can look around the NFL and a lot of teams, they do not have that choice. They're looking for a quarterback. They're going to get probably a quarterback in the top 5 who they truly don't believe in all the way, but they said, you know what, we need a quarterback. So we've got to take one of these rookies, even though they have other holes elsewhere. So for me personally, I'm feeling more as we're getting closer, 5 weeks away, still feels like a long time, that they go trenches. I'm kind of leaning towards right now at the end of March is a defensive tackle, but I don't know. I feel like they feel comfortable where they're at right now. I know DJ Reader's not here. I know they need a nose tackle, and there's still a draft to go, but I don't know. It feels like trenches.
Yeah. I'm not moved off of my thought that they're probably taking an offensive tackle at 18, because I think there'll be a good one available. I think there'll be one that they like available. I don't think it's going to be just a situation where, oh, you have to take this guy because you need an offensive tackle. I think they're going to be in the situation where they go, ooh, we really like this offensive tackle. And Trent Brown's on a 1-year deal. He's a right tackle. We won't be picking this high again next season, I don't think. So let's take him. And then round 2, that one's been up in the air. I could see wide receiver. I could see defensive tackle, really just T'Vondre Sweat, I think, in that situation of like he fell to them, they'll take him. Or if Newton somehow falls that far, but I don't think that'll happen, even with the smoke that he's going to fall. I could see a lot of ways they go in round 2, because you could still look at some positions that would be surprising, but how surprising? Corner. We've talked about round 1 corner. They could go round 2 corner. They could go round 2 with an edge player. They can go round 2 with an interior offensive lineman. That's usually where you find those interior guys. Say they want to build some competition for Volson, and then even if Volson does play well, let's say they go get Zach Frazier in round 2. That's really just your center of the future. I don't think you'll even compete really with Volson too much unless he beats out. I guess you could, in a way, have him compete against Volson. Is he a better center than Volson is a guard, and then kick Karras over to guard, maybe? But let's say you could grab Cooper Beebe or something. There's so many ways you can go round 2. If I had to guess right now, it is trench heavy. I think I'd go offensive tackle round 1, and I feel like Sweat might be their round 2 for them, and they might like it. But that one's confusing, though. I think that is a reason that Zach Taylor was at the Texas Pro Day, was because T'Vondre Sweat and the off-field and the effort concerns, similar to what Trent Brown kind of has, except he's still in college, about is he really locked in, and what better way to find out than to go to Texas, talk to all the coaches, talk to everybody he knows about him, talk to him personally. Although Trey Walters was also there, but they've got some good receivers that they need to look at too.
Day 2 wide receiver. I'm telling you, it's going to happen. It's a leap year. They're going to look for the T. Higgins replacement because, again, we're not breaking any news here. Personally, feel like this is going to be his last year with the Cincinnati Bengals. I do think he's going to play for the Bengals in 2024, but that will probably be it. So you have to be smart for the front office. I mean, it's going to be fun. If they use 10 picks, awesome. Can't wait to see all the 10 players. But at the same time, you got to look at your roster number and all those rookies making the 53 man. We'll see what happens. It should be fun. Again, free agency is only a week and a half in. Wouldn't be surprised if the team brought in nothing crazy. There's really not a whole lot of big names left. Maybe add some more guard depth, maybe that offensive line depth, maybe that cornerback. So it allows them to kind of go into this draft. If the cornerback isn't there in the first or second round, that they could just say, you know what, we feel comfortable with the room we do have. And then DJ Turner in year 2 and Cam Taylor-Britt. So we'll see what happens. Plenty of draft talk on the way, but I do want to kind of wrap up where we are with free agency. And if there are any players that you see out there and you feel like they could fill some spots on this Bengals roster on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. Bengals added plenty of new additions. They did say goodbye to DJ Reader, Joe Mixon, to be determined on what Zach Moss looks like in the running back. We've talked plenty about Zach Moss and the new additions and free agency, even Trent Brown at the beginning of this podcast. If you were to look, maybe it's cornerback, maybe it's defensive tackle, maybe it's an offensive lineman, guard or tackle, the guys who are left, who would you feel like would be worth maybe a one? It feels like they're doing a lot of 1-year deals or a 2-year out deal with some of these free agents available.
Yeah, there's a bunch of free agents still available. Maybe not the high end guys anymore, but You look at a Dalton Risner. I think that's one you could look at a 1-year deal if you want him to compete with Volz for that left guard job. Could they look into and kick the tires on Xavier Howard because he played for Lou Anarumo? He's a cut player, so he doesn't count towards a comp pick situation, but would he even start over DJ Turner now that he's kind of lost a little bit of his athleticism and his ability to play? I'm not fully opposed to some of the wide receivers they could take a peek at. I don't think anything serious, but I think when you're looking at DJ Shark or somebody who's probably cheap and could give you some of the stuff you're missing, like we keep talking about those wide receivers who've got some long speed to them, and maybe they can play in the slot a little bit. Maybe you kick the tires on a Paris Campbell. I don't know. It's just somebody out there that, let's say, or MVS, but like you don't have a guy right now to replace Tyler Boyd other than Charlie Jones and Andre Iosivas. Throw another guy into that competition. I mean, they might like MVS because he did kill them that one time. So I think some of those guys might make sense, but it's not a ton out there. I still want a defensive tackle. I look at Calais Campbell in terms of, can you get that third?
Yes.
Because they like 3 starting defensive tackles. If you're not looking at Tyler Tart, Campbell's not really much of a nose. He's pretty big, but he's old, and hasn't really played a ton of nose tackle. But he's a good player still. I think he was still a good player for Atlanta last season. And other than that, I mean, not a ton of guys out there that you're really trying to take a hard look at. I think it's interesting. Marcus Bailey hasn't signed anywhere. Do they just end up getting him back? This type of guys we're talking about now. Yeah, there's not a ton. I'm trying to peruse the list a little bit and see if there's anybody else that sticks out to me personally. I think, yeah, you're looking at all these guys. I'm not seeing too much here. Well, one other guy, give the shout out. They won't do it. Jakob Johnson. He was the fullback for the Raiders. I think he's a good fullback.
They need a fullback.
They haven't had one in years. They're not going to be interested. That'd be something I'd kick. I'd throw a 1-year deal at him. It makes you a little more multiple. It makes you a little bit, you talk about going under center. Now you can go I formation. You can have him in the shotgun with Zach Moss or with Chase Brown, and you can get to different run plays. I don't think they're going to do it. I think that they like to do tight ends, not fullbacks. They don't really like going heavy that often anyway. But I personally, I would see, what does it look like? Are we looking at like a vet min deal here? Like, come on in. Let's get a little more, let's differentiate this offense.
I'll just say this. I've already said it before, and I'm not, I mean, anything could happen as we're recording this at 7:33 on a Wednesday night. Zach Taylor, if you're a friend of the show, if you do listen, you guys have been making moves every time we hit end record, the whole entire free agency. Fullbacks are people too. Make sure you're keeping your eyes open for these fullbacks. If they're available in free agency, they're not going to cost anything. Probably that minimum of like $1.2 million. Bring them in, add them to the run game. The more, the better. You look at what the 49ers do. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, when it comes to wide receiver, for me personally, it just feels like the only wide receiver they're going to add will be a rookie. I don't see him doing it. And the Tyler Boyd is moving on. He's not coming back. He's probably going to go to the Kansas City Chiefs or the Pittsburgh Steelers now that the Jets signed Michael Williams. I know they had an interest in him. But to be determined, wish him all the best. Was great in Cincinnati, but he's not coming back. And he'll get value elsewhere. But for the Cincinnati Bengals, I just don't see them doing it. I know a lot of people were joking. They're like, oh, what about Michael Thomas from the Saints or an Odell Beckham? No, I don't think that's a good idea. I think just look at your day 2 wide receiver. You get guys like Yoshi, and I think they have high expectations for Yoshi. Joe Burrow thinks a lot of him. He obviously didn't get enough time with Charlie Jones. Charlie Jones was injured, and then Joe was injured. Then Charlie came back, and, to be determined on what he is as a wide receiver in the NFL in year 2. But Yoshi, I do think, get him more reps. I wish they would have done that more towards the end of the season when Joe was out, was put Yoshi in there more, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, my thing with Yoshi is just I don't think he's too big of a slot player. I think he's doesn't have the short area movement ability. I think Charlie Jones does have that, but Charlie Jones doesn't seem to be. He didn't seem to take up slot very quickly last season, based on the preseason and what the work that he got. So I have a little bit of concern there with him just taking over Tyler Boyd's role. But when it comes to Yoshi, the production was there, but I feel like he played a lot of outside stuff. I think he's kind of in that role to be if T. Higgins misses time, maybe you could throw him out there, take up some of those snaps, split them with Trent Irwin again. And then maybe you can put him out there. Maybe you're not thinking of a Tyler Boyd role, and you're thinking of we could be multiple. We could be a little more multiple with these guys, and I could put Yoshi outside and put Jamar Chase inside. Maybe that's the way you go. But if you're trying to just replace a Tyler Boyd role, I don't. It's Charlie Jones, maybe, but I don't feel good about it just because of how little we saw last season.
Yeah, no, there's a lot we want to see more out of this whole entire group without the Tyler Boyds. And again, I feel like T. Higgins will be on the roster in 2024, but you have to think about his replacement. And then you have a guy like Dan Pitcher. Obviously, Zach Taylor's still going to be calling the plays. He was the head coach. He has been since day one. But there will be some new voices in the room, even though Dan Pitcher has been here since the Marvin Lewis era with some of their other assistants that they hired. So we'll see what that looks like offensively. The biggest thing is protect number 9. I feel like the rest will work itself out, but still a lot of offseason to go for the Cincinnati Bengals. They'll get to their offseason program in May. The NFL draft 5 weeks away. Free agency isn't over, but I don't feel like a lot of huge names are left for the Cincinnati Bengals to choose from. But they did add a few new pieces, and we'll see what it looks like in 2024. You have a great piece over on All Bengals, Sheldon Rankins. Anything else coming up soon?
I'll probably get one up on Trent Brown pretty soon because I've watched him for years, so it shouldn't be too difficult to get that up. Hopefully this week, but it's getting late in the week. I don't post them on the weekends, so it could be a Monday morning one. And then there's no more signings. I'll finally get to some of these smaller guys and do a Zach Moss piece.
Ooh, I can't wait for the Zach Moss piece. I know we've talked about it before. It feels like a lateral move for them, but I'm ready. Running back by committee. We'll see what it looks like, and I'm sure they'll add a rookie running back too. Make sure you check it out. All Bengals, all of Mike's work. He has a great piece now. Sheldon Rankins and plenty coming this offseason. Follow him on Twitter, Bengals_stands. You can follow me at LNDS Patterson. Thank you for listening to It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. We'll be back next week.